This is a Hog Sports Network podcast. You're listening to the Whole Hog Football Podcast, bringing you the latest news, analysis, and more. Here's your host, Matt Jones, with Scotty Bordelon of the Hog Sports Network and WholeHogSports.com.
Arkansas is 1-0, a 56-13 victory over Western Carolina last Saturday at War Memorial Stadium in Little Rock. Don't really know how much we can take out of that game. Western Carolina was totally overmatched on one hand, but on the other hand, the Razorbacks beat an opponent like that the way that you would expect a good team to beat an opponent like that. So we'll try to break it down today with Scotty Bordelon and Ethan Westerman. I'm Matt Jones. Let's start with you, Scotty. Just your overall takeaways from Arkansas winning this game. It was never really close. They go up 21-0 after 4 possessions. It's 35-3 at halftime. They're able to get some backups in and play the fourth quarter. It seemed like going into it, it was pretty much lockstep with how you'd want a game like this to go.
Yeah, I think so. And I thought, I didn't write about this on Saturday because I think Bob was writing a sidebar. The lead note in the notebook package was going to be on KJ. But I thought KJ did just about everything you wanted him to do. I mean, he was efficient, which I think we've become accustomed to him being efficient. Looked pretty good on his deep ball. I think there was one that he may have wanted to have back. I think it was a post route, maybe inside the 5 or the 10-yard line to Andrew Armstrong that came up a couple yards short. Not really sure what happened on that throw, but I mean, outside of that, I think KJ was he was pretty smart in the run game. Like, I think you saw his instincts take over, especially on that play near the goal line, or I guess it was in the red zone where he just literally like had to pull the ball away from Dominic Johnson because Dom was about to go down for a 5 or 6 yard loss probably, but KJ turned that into a 17-yard touchdown. Like that's things that I think, even though it was pretty crazy play, I think that's something that it's kind of like, yeah, KJ can kind of do that. Sharp through the air, I thought. And he spread the wealth around to a bunch of different receivers and made guys feel like they were really involved in the game. They didn't really use him a lot in the run game, but he was still pretty solid when he ran with it. And I can't not talk about the play where it was kind of another I lift weights type play where, I mean, a linebacker had a free shot at him and the kid just like the linebacker bounced off of KJ. And then KJ completes a first down ball to Andrew Armstrong. It's pretty nuts. I guess outside of KJ, I think my top thing was Isaiah Satania giving them some pop in the return game. I think he had 97 total return yards. Arkansas hasn't had much electricity in the return game, or a guy that's like fielding punts or returning kicks that you feel like, man, he could be a total game breaker. But I think Isaiah gives Arkansas some of that. And Sam was talking after the game about, he's dangerous now, and we've got they've got a weapon in Isaiah. So I'm, in the next few weeks, going to see if maybe Isaiah can remain consistent with that.
No, I thought it was about as much as you would want to get out of a game like that. I think number one, you walk away from it and you got a big win, which was expected, um, and you walked away not really that banged up, which is probably the biggest win of the entire day for the Razorbacks. With this grueling stretch that just kind of looms ahead whenever it even starts with BYU, just BYU, LSU. That whole stretch of games, you don't want anybody down for that, and so I think that was probably the biggest thing was nobody got hurt. But aside from that, I also thought it was interesting to see these players that Sam is continually in the preseason, just kind of been high on, like your Jaden Johnsons, your Brad Spence, and then come up with plays. It's one thing to, see a couple periods of practice and Jaden Johnson looks good in that, and then it's another to see him, get an interception and force a fumble and be all over the field. Brad Spence get a pick six. I just think it was one of those type of things where there was a lot of unproven players for the Razorbacks because we haven't really seen them do anything in a game setting. Talk about the whole batch of receivers as well. It was just one of those games where it kind of just clarified a little bit of things just from actually getting to put your eyes on these guys in a game.
Yeah, I thought the secondary was pretty good overall. Maybe outside of like the deep ball that Jaheim Singletary gave up, I think Jalen Braxton gave up kind of a chunk play, I think, over the middle of the field, but Nudie again is like continuing that trend of, early season picks. He's got 3 picks in the first, 2 weeks of the last couple seasons. He's got 5 since he's been here. So I don't know what it is that allows him to, I guess, kind of get out of the gates quick. But anytime I can watch him, do an interception celebration, I'm going to take it. I enjoyed that a lot. And it was choreographed. Jaden Johnson told me after the game the other day that Nudie told the guys in the secondary ahead of time what his celebration plans were, if he was to come up with an interception, and he did. Um, but yeah, like, Nudie solid. I think he gave up 1 reception the other day, but it was for a 4-yard loss, and so I think you'll take that any day of the week. Hudson Clark again. I think Hudson Clark and Nudie just kind of showed their savvy on their picks, and yeah, it was pretty cool to see Jaden Johnson kind of carry his fall camp to Little Rock, and that Brad Spence pick six that had to be a really really cool moment for him. And I remember watching the play that Jaden Johnson came up with the forced fumble, and I'm just like, maybe Jaden Johnson from last year, he might miss that tackle, to be perfectly honest. But this time he like broke down, made a play on the ball, and that's something Marcus Woodson stresses a lot when we're at practice. When the guys are trying to pin a guy on the sideline, go for the football. I mean, if you don't knock the football loose, you at least knock the guy out of bounds. That was a big play for him, and I'm curious to see if he can remain consistent with this, because if he can, with the playmakers they've got in the secondary with like Snacks and Nudie and even Al Walcott, he flashed a couple times the other day. I think the Arkansas secondary could be, kind of enjoyable to watch for a change.
I think 2 things stood out to me Saturday. Well, I mean, more than 2 things, but just a couple things that I want to say stood out to me. Number one, I think Arkansas's conditioning was really good. It was hot, and I didn't realize how hot it was. We're sitting in an air-conditioned press box, but when I walked out after the game, it was just real steamy, and they were playing in some real humid, hot conditions down there. You saw Western Carolina struggling with cramps the entire game. I don't know that I ever saw one Arkansas player come off the field with cramping, and I think that when that's the case, some of it's good fortune, but I think that there's probably a lot of preparation that goes into that as well. And I think their strength staff, their nutrition staff probably deserves some credit for that. The other thing that stood out to me was that it just didn't look like Arkansas ran anything other than maybe what you would call its baseline offense and baseline defense. Nothing real exotic. I don't think they wanted KJ Jefferson to run the ball very much. You mentioned the play where he scored the touchdown on the run. That was supposed to be a handoff to Dominic Johnson. And, he ends up making a big play out of it, but you just didn't see him carrying the ball a whole lot. And then defensively, it just nothing looked just real exotic again from the defense. It was just kind of, very generic. We're going to rush 4 defensive linemen, drop others back, put them in coverage. Everything just kind of looked like baseline. And why I think that stands out to me is because of the Missouri State game last year when they weren't able to do that. They had to throw the entire kitchen sink at Bobby Petrino's team in the 3rd and 4th quarter to be able to come back and win that game. And so when you're able to do that against a team that you should overmatch athletically, talent-wise, I think that's a good sign for your team.
Yeah, from a defensive standpoint, I think one of the things that I was expecting to read either on our message board or elsewhere, and I had a neighbor stop me yesterday, and we were talking about the game, and I think he was a little disappointed in the pass rush. But I think for a first game like against Western Carolina, like you don't want to show your hand early, like at all. And I kind of agree with the pass rush thing to an extent. But Arkansas did have, a number of tackles for loss, and they I don't
10,
think
I
they
think,
sent.
right? 10 tackles for loss.
Yeah, that sounds about right. And they didn't send more than 4 very often. And so, I was kind of hoping to maybe see like a Trajan Jeffcoat, maybe stand out a little bit just because he got a lot of pub in the preseason. But Keevy Rose I thought he played pretty well. Just got a lot of space eaters, and I think Arkansas's run defense was pretty good. And Western Carolina, they did get the ball out pretty quick, whenever they were able to. So that right there is going to neutralize your pass rush a little bit. But I thought when Arkansas wasn't able to get pressure, like this is going to sound cliche, but they flew the ball, tackled pretty well. I like Jaheim Thomas too. And I don't think I phrased the question very well in the post game, but that was like the first action that Jaheim has had since I think it was like December 17th. So like a couple weeks, before a lot of teams are, playing in their bowl games, is he didn't go through spring ball, so he didn't have a spring game. So this was like literally his first game, live action that wasn't a scrimmage, in a long time, and he felt pretty comfortable. I think he led them in tackles, and I think he had a TFL on the first play of the game, almost picked off a pass too. So he looked pretty comfortable. I think that's a really good thing right now, especially maybe when you're trying to take it a little bit easy with Chris Paul because of that knee.
And Arkansas ends up with 2 sacks. They probably could have ended up with more, but they get interceptions out of some of those quarterback hurries. It looked like it caused the Western quarterbacks to just throw up some 50-50 balls, and they were able to get interceptions out of those.
That's what I was going to point out. I feel like they might have not gotten all the sacks that maybe some people expected, but Western Carolina's quarterbacks did not look comfortable at all on Saturday. I mean, number one, they couldn't make up their mind to who they even wanted out there, because whenever Gonzalez was out there at the beginning of the game, they just he was rushing things. He wasn't necessarily throwing. He threw one interception, but he wasn't throwing interceptions. He just couldn't run the offense very well. He was throwing it away. Didn't really ever look comfortable. And then they put in their backup, Charlie Dean, and his problem was just decision making. Of He felt the pressure and he would just throw it into coverage. So I think that pass rush, they might not have gotten the sack numbers, but they definitely got the turnovers, and that'll get it done just as well.
Scotty mentioned something about Isaiah Satania a minute ago, and it's something I want to go back to and just say something about. In addition to those return yards that he had a 55-yard return that was mostly nullified. He was able to get, I think, about 18 yards out of it, but because of a block in the back penalty that, to me, it looked like it was a little bit away from the play. And I think you saw his playmaking ability there toward the end of that run, where the block in the back wouldn't even been a consideration, and what you're talking about, just kind of his elusiveness. Sometimes it's not about breaking a 100-yard kickoff return for a touchdown. It's just about putting your team in a good position. And I thought he did that a couple of times, whether it be, a little 12, 13-yard punt return that gets him onto the Western Carolina side of the field, whether it be with a, 28, 30, 55. Yeah, I know the 55-yarder didn't count, but there's a 28-yard kick return, I think, that he had that set him up with a shorter field, still on Arkansas side, but it was a shorter field. And I just think those little things like that can really be a contributing factor to your offense, because, like you said, Scotty, they just have not had that for the better part of the last 3-4 years, or I guess even longer.
Yeah, I was going back, and of course we spent a good amount of time after the game trying to figure out what he actually finished the game with return yards wise.
My head hurt at the end of the game trying to think through
it was kind of a
They had
mess.
some they had some stat issues where we just had no idea what his actual return yardage was, due to all the penalties. But go on.
Yeah, stat broadcast and the PDF that we got from Oliver, were told 2 different stories, but the one that we got from Oliver I think had the numbers right. But I was looking to see, how Isaiah's day in the return game kind of compared to what Arkansas had done as a team, and kickoff and punt last year, or even going back to 2021. But Arkansas had 105 punt return yards against Missouri State last year. The Bryce Stevens punt return factored into that big time. But the last 10 games of last season, Arkansas had 41 punt return yards, and Isaiah had 51 on Saturday. So that's the pop that you want to see. And then his 46 kick return yards were the most Arkansas's had since they lost that wild game at Ole Miss in 2021.
Huh.
I mean, they haven't had more than 46 yards since then, which is it's pretty insane to me. Again, I don't know if this is going to be a weekly thing, But I definitely think Sam Pittman, Scott Fountain are going into week 2, with a lot more confidence. That Isaiah can make some things happen in special teams, whenever he touches the ball. And we talk all the time about, um, special teams can give you an advantage in terms of field position if you give KJ Jefferson a shorter field to work with.
Mhm.
I'm gonna take those odds that he's gonna go get you some points more often than not.
I think some people might look at Arkansas's offensive numbers on Saturday and say, well, that wasn't very good because you're playing Western Carolina, but they scored 7 offensive touchdowns. What happened was they just were set up with a short field so often. Doesn't matter if it was a punt return that put them on Western Carolina's side of the field. I think at least 3, maybe 4 of Western Carolina's turnovers were on that side of the field. So they're set up with a 31-yard field or a 48-yard field or something really short to where they just didn't have to do a whole lot with it. And I think that skews the offensive numbers. Ethan, I know you got thought.
Yeah, I was gonna say, just touching on Satania again, it felt like every time that he touched the ball, that something could happen. And he put him in, like you were just mentioning, in great field position so many times that the offense that just changes the game so much. And I know that, you have your Shane Beamers of the world, those coaches that pride themselves on special teams so much. Um, but it really does make such a difference whenever you have a return man like him who it just felt like anytime he touches the ball, something could break, or if it doesn't break, the offense is going to be in good hands. And then, um, yeah, like you were just mentioning as well about the defense and those turnovers, it just felt like Arkansas offensively might not have had the yards, but they were in such short fields, whether it was a return game or those turnovers. The 3 first half ones all were on their side of the field, and it just kinda shut the door on Western Carolina before they ever even had a chance.
One more thing about Satania I noticed in the punt return, and I'm sure this was a coachable point on the sideline, is his first punt return, he let it bounce, and it probably cost Arkansas about 10 to 15 yards of field position. You didn't see him let it bounce away from him any other times that game. There was one where I think he let it bounce and then he caught it and he ran with it, but you saw him get underneath it and fair catch. And those are all little subtle things that I think go into good special teams play. We're going to talk about.
If I could
Okay.
add one more thing, I
Yeah.
just went and looked at the stat broadcast feed again. Um, Arkansas had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 drives that started on the Western Carolina side of the
Hmm.
field, and they got a touchdown out of all of them.
Yeah.
So, yep, to y'all's point.
Yeah. And I mean, that's 35 points in less than 250 yards of offense. So, I mean, I think the numbers can be a little bit skewed there as far as just having 309 or 79 yards of total offense. We're going to talk about the offensive line. That's a topic that I think deserves its own separate conversation, and we'll do that here in just a minute. We want to tell you that the Whole Hog Football Podcast is sponsored by Kindle King Design Displays Signage, KindleKing.com. That's KendalKing.com.
The Kindle King Group family of companies plays to win, just like our hogs. We know how demanding retail marketing is today. From digital omnichannel creative services, through in-store signing and displays, and finally to social influence, we've got you covered. Our KKG Inc. family of companies, Kindle King, Shopcart Creative, and Soapbox Influence are winning with multiple retailers and brands. We play to win and we'll be a winning partner for all your retail marketing service needs. Go Hogs!
Stay on top of all Arkansas Razorback sports with a Digital Plus subscription on the Hogs Illustrated app. Get complete Razorbacks coverage in one location. Your subscription gives you 20-plus issues of Hogs Illustrated magazine, the most unique and compelling coverage anywhere in the state, plus total access to all the content on WholeHogSports.com, including breaking news, commentaries, analysis, features, recruiting, award-winning photos, and premium message boards. Subscriptions start at just $17 per month. Join the Hog Sports Network team at subscribe.waco.com. That's subscribe.wehco.com. Or call 479-684-5509 to get your front row seat to Arkansas Razorback sports. Go Hogs!
Well, the offensive line play was maybe the big talking point coming out of the game against Western Carolina because, at least in terms of being able to push Western Carolina off the ball, Arkansas wasn't able to do that a whole lot. in the season opener. Pass protection was really good. KJ Jefferson, I think there were two pressures on him. One of them resulted in a sack. The other was in a hurry. I guess that would be the play where Scotty talked about where the defensive player just bounced off of him like he was a trampoline. But not a whole lot of pressure on KJ Jefferson or on Jacoby Criswell when he came in and played in the fourth quarter. Criswell put together a nice drive in his first action as a Razorback. But it's the run blocking that I think a lot of people are a little bit concerned with because Arkansas wasn't able to push Western Carolina off the ball. One thing that I would say that I guess kind of my thought coming out of it was I want to withhold a whole lot of judgment on the offensive line because you didn't see the first team offensive line that I think they wanted to put out there. Brady Latham didn't play. All indications are that he's going through a concussion protocol. Nobody will say for sure that that's what it is, but reading between the lines, that's what we think is going on with him. So he didn't play. Instead of him playing at left guard, Josh Braun, who's going to be their right guard, moves over to the left side. That's his non-dominant side of the field. You got Tykees Crawford comes in and he plays right guard. And so, what you're really doing is you're playing with three starting linemen. Now, I'm talking about three players in their starting position. Braun's going to be a starter on the right side when Latham comes back, and we think that'll be for this week's game against Kent State. So, I mean, what are your thoughts about the offensive line? Sam Pittman touched on it Monday, said that, he was disappointed they weren't able to blow Western Carolina off the ball. But after the game, he also said, let's not make a mountain out of a molehill here. I'm sure he's seen some lines start pretty sluggish in the season and they've gone on to get better. I wonder, what are your thoughts as you look at the line play against Western Carolina?
Well, Kent State's coach Kenny Burns touched on it yesterday that he thinks that Western Carolina just did a really good job of loading up the box, and they were kind of like, oh, if we're going to win anything today, we're going to win the run defense game. It was like they chose one thing that they're not going to let Rocket Sanders or the Razorback running backs kill him. He said that they loaded up the box and made Arkansas throw it, so that's what Arkansas did. And they held up pretty well in pass protection for KJ. So I, I don't think it's too much of a. I mean, of course, you'd like to see them run the ball better against a team like Western Carolina, but whenever they're loading the box like that and forcing you to throw it, it's like Arkansas was forced to take what they were giving them, and they took it pretty well.
I think they knew that KJ Jefferson running the ball was not going to be something they were going to have to worry about because I think you don't put as many guys up there in the box like they were doing if you think the quarterback keeper is going to be part of the offensive plan.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I would also, and this is kind of a Captain Obvious thing too, but like some of Arkansas's negative run plays had nothing to do with like actual run blocking, to a good extent. Like the Bo Limmer bad snap, I mean, that's a team loss. That's just like
it was 19 yards.
Yeah, that's a huge setback right there that had nothing to do with like a running back reading anything or maybe a right guard like getting whipped on a play or something like that. It had nothing to do with that. And then the other one that I think about was I think it was like an 11-yard loss by Rocket. If he just, I think if he, I don't want to say he was like maybe pressing to make stuff happen, but it definitely looked a little bit out of character for him to, not run north and south primarily. Like he was kind of dancing around, trying to figure out, like trying to make something out of absolutely nothing. Ended up dancing around and losing 11 yards, where if, maybe he just runs straight ahead, maybe it's a -1 or a -2 on that play. So if you just take those two plays, that's 28 yards right there, that doesn't really have anything to do with Arkansas's run blocking. But I was looking at Pro Football Focus numbers, and they've changed since I made a post on the board about Arkansas's linemen, their starting line, and their overall offense grades. Kudus was the only starting offensive lineman that graded out over 70, and he was at 77.3, and he was 75.3 in run blocking. So he had a pretty solid starting debut, I think. Everybody else, like Tykees Crawford was 67.8, Limmer was 64.9, and Limmer, I think, was, and Sam said this yesterday too, and we saw him kind of like flexing that hand a
Yeah,
little
kept
bit.
holding
I
his
think that
hand, his wrist
yeah,
area.
yeah, I think it was that snap hand.
Hmm.
And then I think there was, some like the heat and humidity literally played a factor in him being able to snap the ball. Maybe he goes with a glove in the future, but um, yeah, Chambly, when PFF first put their numbers out on Sunday, Chambly was right underneath Patrick Kudus in terms of overall grade, but Chambly dropped to 64.5, and Josh Braun was at 63. Um, I was kind of surprised that Braun's grade was where it was, just because he's got. I know, I think it was the 2021 season when he played the most at Florida, but he does have, quite a bit of experience. So, um,
Hmm.
I don't, yeah, I think in terms of, in a lot of ways, I don't think there's anywhere to go but up for this offensive line moving forward. And I think there's going to be like a hyper focus with Cody Kennedy this week to um, got to be able to establish the run, right? Like that opens up KJ and all the weapons that you have.
Yeah, one more big play for loss was KJ Jefferson's sack. He got strip sacked and had to go back and fall on the ball back at
Right.
about the 2 yard line. You take away that play, the play you mentioned against or by Rocket Sanders, and then the bad snap, and all of a sudden, instead of averaging 2.9 yards per carry, they average over 4 yards per carry. I just did the math here; it'd be about 4.1 yards per carry, and it probably still doesn't alleviate some of the concerns that they had not being able to get as big of a run in some of the short yardage plays. But it does make you feel a little bit different, I think, about the run game as a whole. Because all of a sudden, I mean, you average 4 yards a carry. That's not a bad day at the office from a running standpoint. You average under three, and especially when you're against a team that you feel like you should overmatch, then it does become a little bit of a concern. At left tackle, I think that it's still up for grabs who's going to be the starting left tackle. I mean, I know it's Chambly. I think he's still listed as starting left tackle this week, but you still feel like it's going to be between he and Devin Manuel. Kind of going back and forth with the first team offense during these games until they figure out which one of them works best with this first team line. And I'm really interested to see how they work this week with Brady Latham, because I feel like so much of playing on the left side, that tackle position, is who's playing next to you. And I feel like Latham can provide a little bit of a steadying force, possibly for whoever that left tackle is.
Yeah, if
I
you
would
look
say,
at the Pro Football Focus numbers, just the snap count, Chambly played 49 snaps at tackle, and Devin Manuel played 20. To the point on Latham, he was back in a green no contact jersey on Monday. And when I was watching some position drills, it looked like they had him slotted at that left guard spot. So maybe that's an indication that they're getting him ramped up and ready to go for the weekend.
I will add that I think that this is a great week if you're trying to get things right on the offensive line and open up the running game some. Kent State's fresh off of a game where they allowed almost 400 rushing yards, and UCF set their program record for yards per carry. So it's probably a good opponent, to bounce back from, having a little bit of concern about the run blocking. To have Kent State coming to town, really a good chance with working Latham back in there, and then getting some of these guys a little bit more experience. This is probably a good type of opponent to have coming into town.
So Ethan, you watched the Kent State game the other night because you do our scouting reports on
And I'm
those
sorry
teams.
that you had to do that.
He took one for the team. Tell me, am I wrong? UCF had like 700 yards of offense, and they committed 3 or 4 turnovers.
Yeah, I think 700 may be lowballing it. Or no, it was like 723. So
Okay.
in that realm, and that came with them committing 3 turnovers. Yeah, so UCF hung 56 points despite having 3 turnovers, and had 700 plus yards. So yeah, it wasn't pretty for Kent State. That's probably the understatement of the year.
You've been harping on this since the preseason. You think, or you thought, we'll see if it turns out this way, but you thought that Western Carolina might be a tougher opponent for Arkansas than Kent State, even though Western Carolina is FCS and Kent State is FBS.
Yeah, well, the main reason I felt that way is that Kent State is under a first year head coach they replaced everybody on offense from a team that already wasn't very good offensively. They have only 4 returners on defense, and Western Carolina, I know they're in the FCS in the FCS ranks, but they're a pretty veteran team. Like they have a lot of experience together. They're like riding the high of they finished the year strong. They're going to be juiced up. I just think Kent State right now is probably them and Arkansas State are neck and neck right now for maybe the worst team in the FBS. That's kind of where they're at right now.
Well, coming into the year, Bill Connolly at ESPN, he does his S&P rankings, and coming into the season, he had Kent State 132nd out of 133 FBS teams. The only team that he had worse than Kent State was UMass, who I think they got clobbered by Auburn in their season opener the other day, or maybe it was their second game of the year. I think they played during the week 0. But the point being, they did not compare well with an SEC team at all. And just one more thought before we leave today. We'll preview Kent State more on our end of the week podcast. But I asked Sam Pittman about this yesterday. It feels like there's going to have to maybe be an emphasis this week on not overlooking your opponent, because Arkansas won by so much. And even though they got things they got to clean up, overall they look, I think fairly good against Western Carolina in their season opener. And then you got Kent State, who loses by 50 in its season opener. I just feel like there's a potential this week for overlooking Kent State and maybe not playing your best ball because maybe you haven't practiced as well, knowing that, hey, you could probably just show up and beat this team. And so he's talked throughout the offseason about he really likes his team leadership. I feel like that team leadership is going to have to be really maybe strong, a really strong point of this week for the Razorbacks in their practice getting ready for this game.
I think maybe if Arkansas didn't have KJ, that might be the case. But like I don't remember like the last time that KJ started a game and you just like I don't know, like I feel like Arkansas is going to be focused. I think they're kind of past that, and I think that's part of like the roster is I think a little bit more mentally mature than it has been in the past.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you've got respected voices on both sides of the ball that just aren't going to let that happen. And the coaches, I don't think, are going to let that happen either. I think Sam, since he's been here, has been pretty good about getting his team to be pretty present-minded. Like you can look at 56-6 and think you're going to coast, but they probably will. I don't even know what the spread is, but I would assume it's probably astronomical. I don't expect Arkansas to like offense runs out on the field. It's a quick 3 and out, and it takes them a little bit to like get going. I don't know. I think I'm past the point of them, just kind of floating through a game like this. Like they've got loads and loads and loads of talent, a lot more talent than Kent State, obviously. And I don't think they'll have any issue putting them away or starting fast, because that's been a huge emphasis all preseason, whether it's with the fastball or that bubble drill that they do. I mean, it's been physical from the get-go in practice, and I think we saw that kind of come into fruition last week, and I don't think it'll be any different this week either.
The betting. Go ahead, Ethan.
I was going to say, I think that the team depth, especially defensively, kind of helps with that too, that there's a lot of rotating guys in and out right now where I think there's a sense of a lot of guys, they feel like they're still, trying to earn their snaps. And I just think there's too many people that are still in that zone where they don't feel like they can overlook a single play. They know that there's enough depth all throughout the lineup that if they don't show up, there's going to be some other guys that probably do. So I'm kind of with Scotty on that I think that just kind of the composition of the team, not only with just having, KJ as your team leader, but also just this depth right now, it'd be hard for me to see them coming in and just kind of sleeping.
The betting line, depending on who you ask, anywhere from 37.5 to 38.5 points. And by comparison, I think it was a 34.5 point line for Arkansas and Western Carolina this week. So not a lot of respect for Kent State out there in Vegas, based on the way they played UCF Arkansas a big favorite. In fact, boy, I don't know the last time Arkansas was this big of a favorite. That would be interesting to go back and maybe look up this week. It's been a while since Arkansas was this big of a favorite, especially over an FBS team. A lot of times you don't see FCS teams even have a betting line because it's just such of a mismatch. So Arkansas, big favorite over Kent State this weekend. It's going to be a 3:00 kickoff at Razorback Stadium. It'll be on SEC Network. Hope you'll come to wholehogsports.com throughout the week for all of our coverage leading up to the game. And we'll be back with another podcast later in the week to preview the Razorbacks and the Golden Flashes. For Scotty Bordelon and Ethan Westerman, I'm Matt Jones. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time on the Whole Hog Football Podcast.
The proceeding has been a production of the Hog Sports Network. Look for our daily podcasts on Apple, Spotify, or your favorite podcast platform. For more Razorbacks coverage, go to wholehogsports.com or follow the Hog Sports Network reporters on social media.